demographics. Then, of course, you have deregulation, and then you have digitization. Now, of course, earlier what used to happen was banks had the entire repertoire of how payments as well as collections and the loan system used to work. But now, you have come up with these new set of organizations which are called Fintechs, and they are lean, they are nimble, they can kind of make processes, create codes, create processes, automate faster than what banks were able to do, which is where there is significant competition that is coming into the banking industry. But before we get into that level of detail, maybe let's take a step backward and see where is it that globally this entire step is. So first of all, this might be a slightly different statement. Globally, people want more than banks. Now, it would have been a difficult one if I would have said that people don't trust banks. But the fact of the matter is, after the 2008 financial crisis, which I'm sure most of you are well aware of, there was this feeling of mistrust that a lot of people got. And largely banks were used for payments. Largely it was, yes, the traditional business of banks was credit, and there was another part which was payments. And typically banks were used for payments. And after this particular incident happened, you have seen, things like, of course, gold prices have gone up over the, recent past. Bitcoins have become important suddenly. You have one of the most major economies in the country, that is Japan, having embraced and legalized Bitcoins. And you have Russia, which is looking at, kind of legalizing Bitcoins. So, of course, the modern customer today is looking at avenues to make payments which do not involve banks, which has, of course, I'll come to the Indian context later, but globally this is what's happening. The way we bank is changing. Now, of course, there's a little light in this room, but yes, if I were to do a show of hands of how many of you have gone to a bank branch, if I were to just get a show of hands of how many of you have visited a bank branch. Okay, I see about, maybe with whatever limited I can make out, maybe only about 10% people have been to a bank branch. So people don't want to go to a bank branch, they don't want to, and effectively a whole lot of us in the last decade won't have gone to a bank branch, but thanks to demonetization, we went to a bank branch to figure out who our relationship manager was. That was the only intent for which I went to a bank branch. Otherwise, I won't have gone to a bank branch. So typically at this point in time, I am not dealing with the bank at all. So the generation Y has completely moved away from the traditional banking setup. No one wants to transact on, people don't use cash. When was it that you cut your last check, if I were you to ask you a question? Maybe over the last 3-4 months, you won't have cut too many checks. You're doing all your payments digitally. That is what has happened. Things like bill desk have come up. You do not want to make any of your bill payments, regular bill payments, through a regular check system. You've moved to digital setup. The third thing is, maybe banks are still getting bigger. So I'm giving a global context. So globally, the larger banks do not have too much of a differentiation. They have the similar kind of rates. The only differentiation is when they have their sale. So there's not too much of a difference. Fintechs have brought this change into the banking system. And banks have, honestly, like ours and many others, have started to realize that times are changing and you need to embrace fintechs if you need to get this change going on. So, well, when you come to digital transformation, George Westerman from MIT Sloan had once said that when done well, digital transformation will transform a caterpillar into a butterfly. But if it's done badly, it will transform it into a caterpillar that will eat rather fast. So you have to be very, very careful when you get into digital transformation. It's not like you just decide to digitally transform and it happens the next day. Of course, here in India, what has started to happen is that a whole lot of things have significantly changed. Fintechs have started to come up in a big manner. If you were to look at globally, now this is a data point that I picked recently from one of the reports that was published by Accenture. Till May 31st, 2017, there has been $105 billion of funding to 1,000 firms in the fintech space across the world, which gives you a sense of the kind of business that fintechs are going to take over. The areas are blockchain, you have big data, you have artificial intelligence, you have machine learning. These are the things which are coming up as we're moving forward. You know, in the last decade, we used to, do real-time data analytics to figure out what is it that the customer wanted and what is it that we could sell the customer. Now, instead of real-time data analytics, we have started moving to predictive data analytics, where we want to know what is it that the customer might want in the future. So we are not at all in real time, we are actually looking at the future already. And the importance of data cannot be, we were having a discussion before this, kind of session started. Data is now like the oil in the financial services industry. Mukesh Ambani had made this statement during a recent NASSCOM conference, that data is what is going to drive our processes and businesses moving forward. That is how, this entire landscape is going to change. Of course, the government has, kind of put up the entire public, tech infrastructure in the form of, India Stack. There has been the QR code, there is Bheem, there is a whole lot talk about Aadhaar. And Aadhaar, frankly speaking, is one fundamental, thing which is going to change the entire landscape of the country. Just imagine that you will ultimately be transacting over a phone with your thumb. That is effectively what is being thought out for the industry. So you will not need to interact with anyone. That is, the way the future looks. The government has also set up the Atal Innovation Mission, wherein they are, kind of even getting up to the levels of schools to get banks as well as fintech companies to go to schools and start educating them about processes. That is the intent with which we want to promote digital, because the cost of cash in the economy is so huge that we want to start with a platform wherein there's nothing that is left for cash at all in the market. Well, in terms of what is it that we have done as a bank, because I have to, kind of give you a perspective on what is it that we are doing. So first of all, so before I start off with this, again, a show of hands, how many of you are on Twitter? How many of you are on LinkedIn? How many of you are on Facebook? Thank you. Thank you for the lights. Now look, so effectively speaking, what I figure out is that a significant population of people inside this room are on Twitter, Facebook, as well as LinkedIn. Now today what is happening is that we as a bank are looking at information and behavioral trends of customers on Twitter and creating credit products from them basis whatever behavioral trends we watch. So we are moving from traditional data sources like Sybil to behavioral trends which emerge from how is it that you interact on Twitter. We are the largest followed bank on Twitter across the globe. So to that extent, this is something that we picked up and said that why don't we use artificial intelligence to look over a behavioral trend to sense what is it that you might want to do. So if you are following an auto company and you tweet too much about an auto company, I might be someone who would know that you would be interested in auto loan products, for example. I'm giving you a very simple example. But this is the way fintech is, kind of is disrupting. We developed a chatbot, called YesTag very recently. It's crossed more than 10,000 users, recently as per March. We have now created chatbots available wherein you can walk into a Yes Bank branch. You will have to answer 3 or 4 questions. Like for example, I will ask you what company are you working on. I will ask you for a broad salary range. And I will ask you for what is the sort of product that you need. Within a matter of seconds, I will give you an offer with the amount of money that I can give you, what is the interest rate, what is the EMI, and what will be the loan tenor. Within a matter of seconds. It's not something that you will have to, kind of go through rounds and rounds of discussions for. This is what, disruption is going to start to have now. But as a bank, what is actually debated largely in the world at large is that will fintech companies take over banks? Or rather, will there be a different business model that fintechs would create separate from banks? So we have rather followed a co-opetition strategy to that extent, which is alliances and relationships through technology. We call it the art of banking. So we have started our own fintech program. We recently launched it. We had overwhelming participation with about 750 odd participants from 18 countries applying. We finally selected a set of people. A few of them made presentations to prospective investors just, I think, in the beginning of this month in Mumbai. Few of them already managed to, kind of get funding from top-notch investors. What I'm essentially trying to say is that our strategy is that we would want to use the technology and the expertise that the fintechs would bring to the table and utilize that in the processes that we already have. Now, typically for traditional banks, this tends to be very difficult, but it is suitably easier to integrate once you can indicate to the fintech corporation of what is it that you need. Most of these solutions will finally come to us and therefore to consumers. So that is something that, we have kind of at least partnered. Mr. Kant had, yesterday in his keynote address, which was the first address, and it's always a pleasure, you get energized when you hear him speak. He had made this point that, Indian fintechs have to reach across the globe. So maybe not a show of hands, but would anyone want to guess who was, from a historical perspective, the most disruptive Indian? Any guesses? Samir Bhatia, Shashi Tharoor. No, please go back in history. I'm giving you a cue. Okay, it was the gentleman who gave the world the zero, Aryabhatta. Just kind of think for a minute. He was the disruptor. Before that, we didn't know how to count. He disrupted the world by giving the world the zero. So therefore, I think it's important for us as institutions to, kind of take these fintechs abroad. So we've got into 3 partnerships already. One has been signed with the Malaysian government arm, which is called Magic, which is on the innovation side. The second is in Israel. We have, one of these crowdfunding entities, and then there is, Queen City Fintech in Charlotte in the USA. We have tied up with these organizations to take Indian fintech companies global. We are actually in discussion with many others across the globe to, kind of showcase what kind of work is it that fintechs can do in India. And there is a whole lot of this which can actually be adopted by banks as well as financial institutions, across the globe. Of course, our idea is to create and develop and, if I may use the word, peacefully coexist and co-opt, get processes, automate processes so that we take India into the, future as a truly digital economy. On behalf of my CMD, Mr. Rana Kapoor, as well as Yes Bank, thank Entrepreneur India for this opportunity to speak. Thank you. Have a good day. Do we have Q&A? Yeah, please do.
Well, thank you once again. And, well, that's the drill. We're going to now open the floor for questions from the audience. So I believe you have a question, and the gentleman here as well, the lady there. We'll take 3 questions. Ladies first.
Thank you. Thank you for the great presentation. Regarding fintech, I was just curious, what are the trends you're seeing? Which are the most disruptive fintech companies?
Sorry?
Which are the most disruptive fintech products that you're seeing in the market?
I think blockchain is something that we are seeing which is going to kind of significantly change the way a lot of banking is done, specifically on the vendor financing side. I think that is one huge, in fact, at this point in time, we have been having discussions with entities such as the Indian Railways and the government. So blockchain is something which is coming up in a very, very significant manner. The second thing, we are looking at a lot of artificial intelligence related, bots, which is coming more on 3 sides. One is on the lending side, which is your traditional consumer lending side. Second, a whole lot of it is coming on the trade finance side. Maybe a third area, which is, I think, the future from a fintech standpoint, will be robo-advisory. Because wealth management in course of time is not going to be people dependent at all. So you will possibly be advised in advance basis, whatever the bot would try to understand is your investment pattern and your investment capability. For example, today we will take a form, we will tell a customer, okay, please fill in and sense whether the customer is an aggressive investor or a conservative investor. These are 3 areas where we see fintechs creating significant disruption, because they will, reduce the dependence on the traditional banking system. So, in fact, just to take an example on how a business can be created on a truly online format. So, you are possibly looking at a system wherein there will be a purely online bank only. So, I can tell you one example, and it's really fascinating to read about this bank. So, there is this bank in Russia called Tinkoff Bank. It was started way back in 2006 by a Russian entrepreneur. In 2017, it is the second largest provider of credit cards in Russia. And take a wild guess. So, you might be aware of the banking business. So we typically work on a net interest margin. So the net interest margin of good banks in India is around 4-5%. The net interest margin of Tinkoff Bank is 29.3%. So online, and again, most of their models are again artificial intelligence and predicated on things like these.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah.
So I have worked with Axis and India Bulls, and I'm a budding fintech entrepreneur. So I wanted to know about the Head Starter program, and the one which you're running in, I think it's in Jharkhand, where accelerator kind of program. So what how I have to contact for that program?
So you can contact me separately, but yes, to just give you a sense of what Yes Head Startups is. Yes Head Startup is a proposition for startups wherein we provide them a customized banking solution, number one. So a customized banking solution which has lots of key difficult areas which startups have. Like for example, if I were to very quickly tell you, if you were to use a POS system for payments, there is a charge that is put onto the person who's using the machine. So that charge is there are subsidized rates which are available. Secondly, we have a tie-up with an entity which provides you access to free space to operate from at very, very subsidized rates. That is the second part. And third is, it's very, very early days, but someday we aspire to look at potentially, don't hit me for this, a lot of people would then come and ask me this question. So we are somewhere aspiring to look at venture debt.
Right. So, sir, mine is a lending startup,
Okay.
which I'm planning.
So maybe we can have a chat
Sure, sir.
on the sidelines. Thanks.
So recently there was this demonetization and we could see that the change of people getting from cash to digital was really slow. And once demonetization happened, again people quickly switched back to the cash mode. So again the transactions were low. So what do you think is the problem? Consumers adapt slow and it is like very slow. So what's the main challenge in making people adapt to a new digital system, whether it's in banking or in other sectors? And 76% of India's population is rural. So what is your strategy towards it?
Okay, that's a good question. So let me answer it slightly differently. Have you ever seen a motor car race? You see cars moving very fast, and after the thing is over, it all becomes very quiet. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that that entire area starts to buzz with the fact that a car race happens. Okay, so that's what demonetization has done. Let's be fair. It pushed a lot of people, a lot of us, to kind of move digital. Now there are some traditional set of people in our country who always like to deal with cash, but they have also started. So what has happened is that a whole lot of people who would have never used digital started to use digital and started to embrace it and started to feel that it's easier. Okay, but again it gave a quick start. It gave a head start, but when you want a head start up, it takes a bit of more time. So I think what it has done is it has pushed and brought us into momentum. Now of course we cannot move at the same speed all the time. So you cannot have a demonetization running for 6 months. There will be riots in the country. Okay, but it has given a certain platform and enabled people to at least try what it is all about. So it's like when you're given sachets out, it's only for a try. So to that extent that has happened. So I was yesterday interestingly at a mother dairy. They've got 5 different methodologies available in a mother dairy to take things, everything else but cash. However, 70% of their transactions still today are in cash. But if you ask them dispassionately, what they will tell you is that pre-demonetization, only 5% of their transactions were on using these platforms, and now that number has moved to around about 25 to 30%. Now getting the 30% to 100% is not going to happen overnight, it will take time. So that would be my answer, that the government has given you a head start. Now to take the head start up is to all of us. And to embrace and to continuously go on promoting. Cash has, You can actually go through studies, cash has 3 to 4% cost on the GDP. It's a very, very significant cost. Last question.
So another demonetization. So along those same lines, from your side, from the bank side, when that happened, can you speak to the challenges you faced? You know, because I see it like, I'm from Pune, right? And Pune went from what, 1 million to 9 million people. The roads stayed the same, the rails stayed the same, but the traffic increased. Can you kind of speak to how your challenges were faced when the volume of transactions?
Are you asking me what were the challenges we faced during demonetization?
Yeah, from the rise in the volume, things like that from the bank side.
I think demonetization, the biggest challenge that we had was in managing customers and people. And customers can get really furious when you do not give them the cash that belongs to them. That is all I can tell you. So when you don't give people the cash that belongs to them, they can get really, sometimes they can get wild. So I think that was our most significant challenge. There were many other operational items which happened in the back end, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, it was only about lending an ear, being patient, telling people to be patient. I think that was the most significant thing that we happened, and we had significant government support in terms of telling us that, okay, this is difficult, but just continue with the good work. And thankfully, we passed through unscathed, is what I would say. Thanks.
We'll take one last question.
Sir, good evening. I may sound little stupid in my question. Even then, I am daring to ask you this. Suppose that two companies approach you. One promises, say, 800 million INR turnover in next 2 years, but currently making a negative P&L of, say, minus 100. Another company says, okay, in next 4 years, we are going to do only 80 million Indian currency, but with a profitability from year one and with a growing profitability between the years. YOY growth is there. So which would be your preferred choice for investment?
I don't go purely by numbers. You need to tell me the business model. When you tell me the business proposition, tables can turn very significantly. So if in the first case you were a potential Flipkart, why should I not look at you? And in the second case, if you were again a potential company which is in a manufacturing business where you are doling out a product which is far more, for want of a better word, unique in the system, I would look at you. So I don't think one can in banks go purely by numbers. It has to be the business model. And losses is something that you should have a plan to say that how is it that you're going to cover up your losses. And if that makes sense, why not?
Thank you so much, sir.
All right, so do we have any further questions? We do have a question from the gentleman there.
Hi, it is Adish. We are running an Bitcoin exchange in India. So I just wanted to know your view on Bitcoins and blockchain.
Blockchain, I can give you a review that it is frankly a huge step which will kind of possibly change the way payments and vendor payments across and B2B is made across the Indian and overall system. So for example, we have done a blockchain for Bajaj Finance and its dealers and we showcasing some of these stuff to some large entities in the government, as I mentioned, the railways as well. Bitcoin, RBI does not allow me to talk about it. Sorry.
All right, so on that note, it's time to call it a wrap to our session as well. I'm going to invite Ms. Ritu Maria to please come on the stage to also present a memento to our speaker, Mr. Nikhil Sahni. And can we have a huge round of applause there for our speaker, Mr. Sahni, as well? Thank you indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we do come to the end of the Entrepreneur India Summit 2017. While you've given wings to your ideas, we